Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. In this short video, we will be discussing about the information that we can gain from the periodic table. Now, periodic table is arranged in a very specific manner, and that manner helps us understand many things about an element. Now, it is broken down into groups and periods. First of all, let us understand what groups are. Groups are basically categorized elements, and those categories of elements, you could say, react in a very similar way. Why do they react in a similar way? It is because of their final electron number. मतलब आखिरी वाले शेल में जितने electrons हैं, that's the thing that I'm talking about, and that can be represented by the fact that the group number is exactly what that is representing. For example, if you're talking about group 1, then the group 1 will always have one electron in its final shell. The group 2 will have 2 electrons, the group 5 will have 5 electrons, and the group 8 will have 8 electrons or 2 electrons, depending on whether it is the first or the last. You could imagine it because of the fact that जो ग्रुप 8 के एलिमेंट्स होते हैं उनके अंदर जो है हमेशा मैक्सिमम अमाउंट ऑफ इलेक्ट्रॉन्स होने चाहिए, मतलब कैपेसिटी फुल हो जानी चाहिए, एंड दैट इज व्हाई हीलियम is the element that has 2 electrons instead of having the same trend of having 8 electrons, as I previously said. उसके आखिरी वाले शेल में कैपेसिटी ही सिर्फ 2 इलेक्ट्रॉन्स की होती है, तो वो सिर्फ और सिर्फ 2 इलेक्ट्रॉन्स ही हैंडल कर पाता है. Now, this characteristic, this understanding helps us get a lot of relationships between elements. What do I mean by that? I mean कि आपके जो group 1 elements हैं, all of them are known as the alkali metals. Why are they known as the alkali metals? Because they are soluble and have the basic property, and that is a trend for all of them. They react in a very similar way. लिथियम और अगर वाटर के साथ रिएक्शन करेगा तो हमारे पास लिथियम हाइड्रोक्साइड और हाइड्रोजन बनेगा. सोडियम और अगर वाटर के साथ रिएक्शन करेगा तो सोडियम हाइड्रोक्साइड एंड हाइड्रोजन बनेगा. दिस ट्रेंड इज फॉलोड फॉर एवरी सिंगल element in the group 1, and the reaction, as it is similar, it is due to the fact that it has one electron in its final shell, and that similarity gives them a very close relationship in their chemical reactions. Similarly, और अगर हम group 8 की बात करें तो all of them are unreactive. And why is that? Because every single element in group 8 has the maximum amount of electrons that it can have, and that's the reason why they are so unreactive. Now, this is what you can gain from the group number. Now, what can you gain from the periodic number? Now, I have intentionally had these zigzags at the middle. This represents any number of shells or electrons that we will be discussing in a bit. Now, the other information that you will get is by the periodic number. The periodic number, or whichever period an element is in, that information will tell us the number of shells that an element has. Now, if I come here, then label 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, then this represents how many shells that element has. और अगर आप हाइड्रोजन की बात करो तो हाइड्रोजन is of one period and it has one electron, as it is of group 1 as well. So we can easily make the structure of hydrogen like so. सिमिलरली मैं लिथियम का स्ट्रक्चर बना सकता हूँ. उसके अंदर ये होगा कि दो जो उसके शेल्स हैं शुरू वाले, द फर्स्ट शेल विल बी full with 2 electrons, and another shell will come that has 1 electron in its final valence shell, right? And this trend continues so on and so on. So for example, I want to create the shell or the structure of potassium. If I want to do that, then I can basically do that by creating 4 shells. 1, 2, छोटा कर देता है, और 4, राइट. और इसके अंदर हम 1 by 1 फिल कर सकते हैं. the number of electrons. So instead of numbering each, I'm just going to say how much they have. Second shell may 8 electrons, third shell may 8 electrons, and the fourth shell, as it is of period 4, will have 1 electron. Now what and how does that help us? That helps us in understanding a lot of the physical properties and a lot of the chemical properties and that an element possesses. We will discuss those in much more detail when we're discussing about group 1 specifically, or group 2 specifically, or group 7 and 6, and so on and so forth. This was just a very short video about gaining the information that the periodic table is capable of providing. Furthermore, a periodic table is divided into some sections, and let's identify those sections right now so that it would help us get a grip on many things. This shaded region is considered to be metal, मतलब कि यहाँ पर जो सब कुछ है वो metal consider करा जाता है. Furthermore, this is also considered a metallic region. It's a bit debatable, but it has some metals and it has a lot of metallic properties. For example, aluminum is a very metallic, element and stuff like that. And this characteristic can also then be reflected here, and these would be considered non-metals, like so. ये भी नॉन मेटल ही ग्रुप है. और इसकी क्या वैल्यू है? दिस वैल्यू कैन बी understood from many different aspects. Furthermore, it can be understood from the fact that all of these metals will have, if we talk about the metal oxides, then their metal oxides will be alkali. Not specifically alkali, but base. They will behave as a base. The non-metal oxides will behave as acidic oxides. Furthermore, this also influences the compound or the structure that an element is in. The metals, if they are in a metallic form, then they will have metallic bonding. Non-metals, on the other hand, usually are diatomic, and that means that they are usually covalently bonded. That depends on the element itself. For example, हमारे पास हाइड्रोजन होता है H2 की स्टेट में. That means that it is definitely in H bond H, and that is a covalent bond. On the other hand, और अगर आप group 8 की बात करो तो group 8 में for example neon is an element, and that is in a completely atomic state, and it is not reacted to anything. It does not have a specific bond with anything, so its structure is much more closer to the non-metal. It behaves a lot closer to the non-metal, and we will discuss the metallic or the melting point and boiling point of these elements when we get on their specific groups. Furthermore, this also can help us identify that ionic bonding is basically metal, meaning any of the metals from the blue region plus the non-metals or the elements from the red region. And this would most definitely, approximately 80 to 90% of the time, will definitely create a ionic bond or an ionic structure. And all of these properties will be discussed again a lot more in detail. I just want to show you that you can gain a lot of information from the periodic table, and if you know an element's position in that periodic table, then you can get so much information that it can help you in so many of these topics. फॉर एग्जाम्पल ये जो है हमारा एक बॉन्डिंग का टॉपिक है, ये भी बॉन्डिंग का टॉपिक है, और ये हमारे एसिड और बेसिस का टॉपिक है, ये दिस इज ऑल्सो इन एसिड्स एंड बेसिस. फर्दर मोर द मेकिंग ऑफ द फॉर्मूलाज इज ऑल्सो डिपेंडेंट ऑन विच ग्रुप एन एलिमेंट इज स्पेसिफिकली है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, और अगर आप लिथियम की बात करूँ, लिथियम और अगर हमारा किसी से रिएक्शन करता है तो वो मोस्ट डेफिनेटली एक आयन फॉर्म करेगा. Now, what type of ion will it form? We need to understand that, we need to grasp that information from looking at its structure. Now, lithium is of group 1. That means that I can most definitely say that it has one electron in its final shell, and it has in total two shells. Now, the ion forms, and the purpose of an ion forming in the first place is because of the fact that any element wants to get this type of structure. They want to have in total 8 electrons or a complete shell at the end, and that need or that drive makes the lithium choose the easiest path to get that structure. So let's first of all create lithium's structure, and it could be approximately speaking like so. Right now, this is a complete shell. Right, ये जो है हमारा पहला वाला शेल, उसके अंदर 2 इलेक्ट्रॉन्स फिट हुए हुए हैं, और ये जो है फुल शेल. नाउ लिथियम एक्चुअली, और अगर आप सारे शेल्स को काउंट करो तो जाहिर सी बात है, इट डज नॉट हैव अ फुल शेल. इट हैज दिस इलेक्ट्रॉन दैट इज being a bit of a problem. And what lithium can do is that it can remove this electron, basically minus one electron, or it can try and somehow gain 7 electrons. Now, whichever path would be easiest for it, it will do. Gaining 7 electrons is a hassle. आप सात समझो, आप 7 लोगों को इनवाइट करना चाह रहे हो instead of just removing one person and having the most chill day of that you can have. And that is what lithium will choose, the easiest path, and that exactly is what it chooses. Lithium loses one electron and forms lithium positive, and this positive trend or this forming of the positive charge is apparent for each of the elements in group 1. Sodium also forms sodium positive, potassium forms potassium positive, rubidium would also form positive, and so on and so forth. Furthermore, if we can pick up any other element, for example, let's talk about oxygen and what ionic compound, or what, let's say, since it forms covalent bonds with each other, right? So we know that it can form CO2, right? Or let's try to find out how many bonds does oxygen need, the total number of covalent bonds it needs. How do we figure that out? Again, we would look at its position and we would see that it is of group 6, that is it's of group 6, and that means that it has 6 electrons. 6 electrons means that again it will choose the easiest path. इसके पास इसके अंदर वाले शेल में फुल शेल होगा, बैठा हुआ होगा कहीं ना कहीं, मगर इसके लिए आसान रास्ता कौन सा होगा? Is it easier for it to remove 6 electrons or just add 2 electrons and call it a day? It would say that yes, I'll just invite 2 electrons and call it a day, and that is all I need. It would choose the easiest path, and that is the easiest path. That is the easiest way for it to gain that 8 electronic structure. And so I can say that instead of gaining 2 electrons, since I'm not forming an ionic bond here, since I'm talking about a covalent bond, what will happen here is that this 2 electrons will hence be done in bonds. मतलब शेयर हो रहे हैं ना, covalent bond है, तो oxygen forms 2 bonds. Similarly, और अगर आप नाइट्रोजन की बात करो तो नाइट्रोजन इज ऑफ ग्रुप 5. Group 5 means that it has a need of 3 electrons. If it needs 3 electrons, then in covalent terms, if it will be forming a covalent bond, then it would form 3 covalent bonds in total. And that is all the information that you can just gain by looking at a element's position in the periodic table. I hope that this video was informative in such aspects and it helps you get closer to mastering chemistry, especially O levels chemistry. And for any queries or questions, then you can feel free to comment or message me or email me. And furthermore, I would like to say that Please like and subscribe and share this video if it was helpful to you, and it may also be helpful to others as well. इंशाल्लाह हम इस समराइज्ड केमिस्ट्री के कोर्स को कंटिन्यू रखेंगे और भी डिटेल में डिस्कस करेंगे कि केमिस्ट्री और केमिस्ट्री के जो सारे टॉपिक्स हैं वो क्या क्या लेकर आते हैं. ठीक है, इंशाल्लाह. अल्लाह हाफ़िज़.